Thousands of crime scene photos are released from the home on King Road, where 4 University of Idaho students were brutally murdered more than 3 years ago. I go through the key photos from Idaho State Police, including the K-bar knife sheath found in one of the bedrooms, and what these photos tell us about the crime scene. I'm Angenette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. You know, there is a reason that Mogen & Mogen is America's largest personal injury law firm. It's because the firm fights for its clients and wins a lot in court. The firm has more than 1,000 lawyers that have recovered $25 billion from more than 500,000 clients. In the last few months, a client in Florida got $12 million when the insurance company offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, another client won $26 million. That was 40 times the insurer's offer. Mogen & Mogen makes it very easy to fight for what you deserve. You can even start a claim from your phone. So if you are ever injured, you can start a claim at forthepeople.com/crimefix. Click the link below or scan that QR code that you see right there on your screen. For months now, different law enforcement agencies have been releasing photos and reports for the investigation into the murders at 1122 King Road. And now Idaho State Police have released nearly 2,800 photos from the crime scene. This is actually the 4th batch of photos that the agency has released, and some are actually similar to others that we've seen before, while others are much different. Now, I've pulled many of these photos. I'm going to show them to you and why I think they're important to the investigation. While there are other photos that are simply just too graphic to share, there is a lot of blood in many of them, and they're absolutely heartbreaking. We're not going to show those photos with you. I can tell you that what you can see in Xana Kernodle's bedroom shows just how hard she fought to save her life. We know that she suffered more than 50 stab and slash wounds. Her bedroom looks like something out of a horror movie. Ethan Chapin, as we've told you, was killed in his sleep, and he was in her bedroom as well. The house on King Road is where best friends Maddie Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves were stabbed to death in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. Maddie and Kaylee were sleeping in the same bed in Maddie's bedroom on the 3rd floor. As I mentioned, Xana and her boyfriend Ethan were killed in her bedroom on the 2nd floor. 2 roommates who lived in the house, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, survived and were not harmed. By now, you know that Bryan Kohberger, a Washington State criminology PhD student, pleaded guilty to committing these murders and was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences for the crimes last summer.
Have you had enough time to decide whether or not to plead guilty?
Yes.
Are you pleading guilty freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
Given your choices, do you believe it's in your best interest to plead guilty?
Yes.
Have you discussed fully the matter of pleading guilty with your attorney, and are you satisfied with the advice you've received?
Yes.
Has your attorney advised you to your satisfaction about what your rights are, what your defenses may be, and what the possible consequences to you of your guilty plea are?
Yes.
Has your attorney done everything you've asked them to do?
Yes.
Are you satisfied with their representation of you?
Yes.
Has anyone promised you anything in exchange for your plea agreement?
No.
Has anyone told you to be untruthful in answering my questions today?
No.
Has anyone offered you a reward of any kind other than the plea agreement in order to get you to plead guilty today?
No.
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes.
Bryan Kohberger is spending his days at Idaho's maximum security institution. And despite Kohberger's guilty plea, he has supporters who believe he simply pleaded guilty to spare his own life, and they believe he is innocent. So let's go back to the very beginning as we go through this latest batch of crime scene photos. Just before noon on November 13th, 2022, roommates of the 4 students called 911 and Moscow police responded.
Yep. Where's she at? Where's she at?
Yes.
Where at? Up here?
Up here. We got a call from them that someone, they were looking normal, and I just came in checking in there, and somebody just found. And I checked to see if she was breathing, and she's didn't check him yet, but I'm pretty sure.
13. Okay, get back.
I don't know if they're still in here or not. I really just came in here. I grabbed the knife. They're like
1370. Okay, stay back there, please. Slow down. Just come here. There's two. Looks like fatalities.
I heard her scream, and she ran downstairs because she saw someone. That's what I'm pretty sure she said. Someone's here, and she screamed and just ran downstairs. And I called for her name, but I jumped up and locked my door because I was so scared. And then I heard someone in the bathroom, and I heard her crying, and I heard some guy say that you're going to be okay, I'm going to help you. And I kept calling her name, but she wasn't answering. And then I opened the door for a second, and I saw this guy, and he was not insanely tall, but he was wearing all black and like this mask that was just covering his forehead and his mouth.
The crime scene photos show the front entryway at the front door of the house on King Road. Roommate Bethany Funk's bedroom is on that first floor. That is where she and Dylan spent the night after Dylan said she saw a man in all black walking through the house and heard Kaylee say, "Someone's here." The bed is small and it's disheveled, unmade, as the girls went outside after calling their friends to come over to check out the house and call 911 when they couldn't reach their roommates. They also show the staircase that leads to the second floor. That set of stairs leads to the living room area where there's a large sectional couch. There's also a beer pong table in the living room area. Then there's the kitchen off of the living room. It appears that the kitchen was processed very thoroughly. You can see blue all over the place on the counter and on the floor. To the untrained eye, it looks strange, but it's a liquid called Blue Star that crime scene techs spray to detect even small traces of blood at crime scenes. Blue Star claims to reveal blood stains that the naked eye can't see without damaging DNA. Blue Star is a name brand for one product, and it's luminol based. Now, if you follow crime cases, you likely know what luminol is. It reacts with blood and other items even after cleaning. Roommate Dylan Mortensen told police that the masked man in all black left the house through the kitchen's sliding glass door. That door has blue stains all over it too. This makes you wonder, was the nearly 8-hour span of time between the time the murders occurred and the 911 call cause for concern among investigators? Were they looking to see whether the crime scene had been cleaned up or whether the killer could have cleaned up blood and left the scene? Blue Star was used in many, many locations around this house, including outside Dylan Mortensen's bedroom, which is off the living room. A shoe print, later described as a Vans shoe print, was discovered outside of her door. It was mentioned in the initial probable cause statement, but then we really never heard about it again. It was suggested it could have been the killer's footprint. Blue Star was also used on the handrail that leads from the second floor to the ground floor in an effort to look for blood that can't be seen by the naked eye. Now, if you followed this case closely, you are familiar with 2 unknown male DNA profiles that were found in the house on a handrail going from the second floor to the ground floor. Those were never put into CODIS, possibly because of the quality of the samples. Now we're seeing those samples. Those samples have been described as unknown male B and unknown male E. The defense wanted to point to those samples as possible alternate suspects had the trial gone forward. There was also a marker for blood spot A. There were other areas of blood on the handrail that were documented too, one with the tag 41. The photos also document the third floor of the home where Kaylee and Maddie's rooms were located. Kaylee's bedroom is untouched, her Idaho sweatshirt hanging over her chair and her bed covers pulled back as she was sleeping in Maddie's room with her. The dog cage for Kaylee's dog Murphy is also there. Then the photos move to Maddie's bedroom where she and her best friend Kaylee were stabbed to death as they slept. Kaylee's pink boots were in her windowsill. You could see those from the outside of the home. Photos of the K-bar knife sheath, the USMC symbol side down on the bed, are also included. The sheath had been described in court documents as being next to Maddie's leg and partially under the comforter. The handle portion of the sheath is hanging off of the bed in one photo. How the sheath was left there and why has been a lingering question. Was it dropped there in a frenzy and forgotten? Or was it left there on purpose? Only one person really knows for sure. Supporters of Bryan Kohberger suggested it was planted. Testing of the leather strap at the crime lab revealed an unknown male's DNA on that strap. It was eventually tracked back to Bryan Kohberger by the FBI using genetic genealogy. A mixture of Kaylee and Maddie's DNA was found on the back of the sheath, along with an unknown male's DNA. So I want to bring in Joseph Scott Morgan, the host of Body Bags, the hit podcast, also a forensic death investigator, a retired one and a very good one at that. So Joseph, I want your first reactions upon looking through these crime scene photos, the latest batch, almost 2,800 of them.
Yeah, well, it's something I got to be honest with you, Angenette, it's something I didn't expect to see. I thought that we had, kind of moved on. I don't guess I should be surprised, but here we are, and we have to engage and talk about this because I think the first thing that struck me was the sheer volume that was released, and some of the stuff is benign. It's stuff that we do at crime scenes, kind of orientation shots, because to show negatives is just as important to show positives. An absence of something is just as significant as the presence of something. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff in there like that. However, when it gets down to brass tacks, you see the extent to which the crime scene investigators went at the scene, because to say that there is to say there's a copious amount of Blue Star application here is an understatement. They used it, and I understand why they're using it. And they're trying to pick up on the most minute evidence of blood that's there in that environment, that was contained there in that house that all four of these people shared, just to identify it. Because, at certain times we walk into scenes and you look around and there's certain things, we use a term in science called viewing something with the unaided eye. Mm-hmm. And there's, within our spectrum, we cannot pick up on it. So you need this illumination. And Blue Star, though it varies from luminol, it's the same purpose. It's interacting with the iron in our blood. Everybody knows, they tell you, you need iron in your system for your blood, right? So iron is contained in the hemoglobin. And so what happens is when Blue Star is actually applied to an area, say for instance, even the thing that you can't see will suddenly pop. And you can see that in a couple of shots here where you have the application of Blue Star, and then all of a sudden, standing out within that kind of array, you'll see these kind of hyper white areas. Well, that means there's blood there, okay? Mm-hmm. And the photos that we're viewing right now, indicate that there is a presence of blood, and it paints a rather ghastly picture.
I want to ask you specifically about the kitchen area. We have Blue Star being used in large quantities in the kitchen area and along the slider door. And I look at that, and it almost looks like they just splashed it all over the place. Is that because they're looking potentially at the possibility that there was a crime scene cleanup here? I mean, you go into a crime scene, you don't know what you've got. You know what your witnesses have told you.
Yep.
Are they looking to see, like, because of the length of time between the 911 call being placed and then when the roommates said these homicides likely happened at, just after 4 a.m.? Are they just covering all of their bases and thinking, was there possibly a cleanup here?
Yeah, bingo. Do you want to sign up for our Crime Scene Investigator Academy? Because you're right on target.
I've covered a few of these.
Yeah, you have. Okay, so the idea is the old adage, you cast a wide net, you catch a lot of fish. Yeah. And to your supposition here about the sink area, that would be a prime spot to go and clean up, okay? And so that's what they're doing here. They're just looking for any evidence of this reactant with the hemoglobin that might be there. Now, people need to understand this and be very, I want to be very clear on this. Just because you find blood at a scene, you have to be very careful because that blood is not necessarily associated with a terminal event, okay? I mean, you can have blood deposition for any number of reasons. Guys cut themselves shaving, people scrape their knees. You've got 3 women here that might have menses. There's any number, and I've seen it all. I've seen the array of it. And so this, merely what you're doing is you're qualifying. You're not quantifying. You're qualifying the idea that, yes, in fact, there is blood there. So if you're going to the sink in particular and around that area, one of the things you're thinking about is that, yeah, this would be a prime spot. And one more thing, a clue that you gave away just a second ago, it's adjacent to the sliders, right? This is like you're thinking and a lot of people did this, over the course of these many years that we've covered this case. People are speculating, egress, points of egress, and, trying to remove yourself from that location. Well, the last thing that maybe a perpetrator would want to do is clean their hands before they leave, or clean an instrument or something like that, and then hop out the door. That's significant. But I got to tell you, just reviewing the images right now, I see as I had mentioned, a copious amount of Blue Star being applied at the sink. Mm-hmm. But those little white, those kind of hyper white little dots. And again, I've got a very limited view here from what we have. I don't see that presentation here.
Interesting. On the hand railing, going downstairs, and when I say that, I mean toward the front door, a lot has been made about 2 unknown male DNA samples. A lot of people, including Bryan Kohberger's defense, have pointed to these unknown DNA samples. It sounds like they were degraded. They were never put into CODIS. We now have photographs of those samples, like B and E. The defense wanted to point to those as potential alternate suspects. It was very strange how we never got any answers about those profiles. It sounded like they were degraded, and they didn't believe they were related to the crime scene. We're now seeing that these were small spots.
Very
Even
small,
Ann Taylor described them as small spots, and they are not in the actual areas of the bedrooms. In your experience, I mean, is that much ado about nothing? Because people are still talking about that and thinking, oh my God, this points to more than one killer. Or
no. I don't. No, I don't think that it's much ado about nothing. Everything should be considered at a crime scene. Okay. However, you talked about, kind of the degrading here. And if you're doing a visual assessment of blood, I'm not saying that it's perfect, but you can pick up on aged blood as opposed to fresher sample of blood. Aged blood is many times it's dried out. Of course, there's environmental factors that play into all of this, but aged blood is it's darker. Sometimes it's very flaky, that sort of thing. And how it's identified, did they identify it as a result of an application of Blue Star? Is this something that somebody, because you're going down, I'll give you, for instance, if I were working the crime scene and the handrail, because that's an area of support, right? So you're walking down, you're kind of holding yourself at that point. Well, that's a point of contact. That's something I'm going to have a hand lens out at the crime scene, and I'm going to go over every surface, just visually inspecting it, running down the handrail, all the points of potential contact. And also, I would have to look on steps to see if there are any droplets that kind of communicate, relative to the position, say, of a blood droplet on a handrail. Is there anything else down below? Because gravity is an effect here. I mean, I think that people are right to ask those questions. Defense is right to ask those questions, or at least put that forward. But the sample itself apparently is in such a state that it just it wouldn't marry up with the timeline, I think. And that's a big problem, particularly when you and I are sitting here, we're now seeing these images of, let's face it, as horrible as this is, it's fresh. Okay, it's fresh deposition at that point in time, and those two things don't necessarily correlate.
Well, we're all hoping to get more answers when some more of the court documents are unsealed, more answers about the DNA aspect of this.
Yes.
Let's talk now about the sheath. We're now seeing the sheath. We had seen it before in the crime lab. There's barely any blood on it. In the room, I don't want to be gruesome, but the room had a lot of blood on the bed, of course, and other parts of the room. But the sheath, we're now seeing it on the bed physically. What are your thoughts about just being a few specks of blood, and then there's like an unknown male contributor on the back of the sheath of DNA, and apparently it didn't have it wasn't like a high quality sample. And then we have Kohberger's DNA on the strap of the sheath. When you look at the DNA notes, it says it's on the strap. They swabbed the strap. So what are your thoughts on seeing those actual photographs of the sheath on the bed?
Okay, I'm going to frame this in this manner. If it's context, I think for the first time, and now I'm talking just kind of like as a human here, not as a crime scene person, forensics person. For the first time, we see it in context. We see it positioned on the bed beneath her leg, and it is face down. So when I say face down, like we've commonly seen the sheath, when you look at the front side of it, you can see, emblazoned with the USMC on it. We now see it wedged, at the scene. And it really puts things into perspective, And so when I consider this, putting back my forensic hat now, when I see this, one word that comes to mind is a term that we use in forensics, and that's called pristine. Pristine doesn't mean, in our context, perfect. Okay, it means in its natural occurring state. And early on, when this, I don't know, within 2 or 3 days, when I was first asked this question about the sheath or about the knife, I asked early on, was there a sheath left behind? And lo and behold, a couple of days later, we found out that there was. Okay. We didn't really know what the status of it was. And I began to think, why would some person leave a sheath behind? And I have a myriad of reasons why I think that occurred. But the one thing that I can take away from this, going back to what you had said about how much blood is contained in all those other spaces, the sheath bears evidence of the fact that this is something that happened prior to, the unsheathing of the knife. Now, I know that seems rather obvious, but it's not like they went back, the perpetrator went back and put their hands on the sheath after the actual event. This is a one-off where you draw this thing and then you drop it. And you're in such a frenzy. And there's a number of reasons why this individual would have been in a frenzy. And you forget about it. You just leave it behind. And any of those kind of ancillary droplets that are on there, I think that probably arose in the heat of the moment. I mean, look, Angenette, let's face it. This sheath is immediately adjacent to this young woman who's been butchered. Okay. So it's not surprising that you would find, kind of a satellite deposition there, I think. But it was just left there. And that goes, I think, I'm no profiler, but it goes to this idea that the mindset that this person was in when they were attacked, they were in attack mode. And you can extrapolate a lot from that. I think it's probably a sexual frenzy. They forgot because they're so into this moment in time with the butchery that's going on, and also added that this individual may have been surprised not knowing that there was not just a single occupant in the room. They got two.
There could have been two, and then Xana.
And then you go downstairs and you're not thinking not you, the universal you. Your person's not thinking about, oh my gosh, I left something behind, something critical, like a sheath. Still, for the life of me, I haven't understood why an individual would not have that belted on them, because that sheath has got such a robust belt loop on it. If anybody has not seen it, take notice of it. You go to all of this trouble to glove up, potentially to wear a coverall. And, the coveralls that we believe that were being worn didn't have belt loops. And, it's kind of in this whole grand scheme of all of this from an evidentiary standpoint, that's kind of the Achilles heel here for the perpetrator, right? The one thing that would facilitate this homicide and maybe have stretched it out even further as far as checking who this was, because that's that one kernel that's planted, relative to the DNA, where you can go out and now you begin to build out this genealogy profile based upon that. And it was left behind. It was critical error. I'm not saying that he never would have been caught. It would have been more of an uphill push, though.
It would have been far more difficult to file charges in this case. It would have taken much longer without the DNA, for sure. Joseph Scott Morgan, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. I appreciate it.
You're quite welcome, Angenette. You have a good day, okay?
You too. Now, at least one of the families of the victims in this case is incredibly upset that these photos were released by Idaho State Police. You may recall that two of the families went to court in Latah County seeking to block the release of some of the crime scene photos by Moscow police. Kaylee Goncalves' family posted on Facebook, "We got a call at 11:04 a.m. that photos would be released this afternoon. By the time the call ended, 12 minutes later, the photos had already been released. Likely they had been available before the call. We just didn't know it yet. That's the heads up we received. Please be kind, and as difficult as it is, place yourself outside of yourself and consume the content as if it were your loved one, your daughter, your sister, your son, or brother. Murder isn't entertainment, and crime scene photos aren't content. In addition, we know so many of you armchair detectives will turn this into your show profits, zooming into things, analyzing blood spatter, suggesting that things don't add up, yada, yada, yada. It's disrespectful and gross. Kaylee Jade, I am so sorry that this happened to you. I am so sorry that people who never even knew you now post about you, suggesting things about your life that are so untrue. We will never quit fighting for you. The best thing about all of this is that you are in heaven and you have no idea of the hate and ugliness. I love you, Kaylee Jade." And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.